Hello, class, and this is my persuasive speech that I'm going to be giving you on why you should get a dog. Starting out, I have loved dogs ever since I was a kid. I've always had a dog in the house. Usually it was labs at first. Then I was in the Marine Corps for a bit, didn't have one, but when I came back, I got this beautiful wolf hybrid about around 6 weeks old in Arizona. I called him David Bowie. He was all black, had one blue eye, and had some white fur, and just was the most gorgeous dog, in my opinion. A lot of people just would always get fixated. And it was funny because I had a hard time trying to not explain that he was a wolf hybrid, but he was obviously a wolf hybrid. There was no doubt about it. But he was still great, had this lovable personality, and I raised him for about 2 years in Arizona. I moved up to Portland with him, within a ex at the time, and things had fell through, and I had Bowie just to myself. And I noticed as he was getting older, though, he was starting to get more aggressive. It started out slow, just simple nips out of hand, but then he was starting to get aggressive with other dogs, and it started to progress worse and worse throughout the 2 years that I lived up here with him. That was really hard to come to terms with, in understanding that my dog now was becoming more aggressive and becoming more of a liability, and I felt like it was a reflection on my ownership and what to do with it. And so, after careful deliberation, I decided to get another dog. Maybe that would help Bowie. And Bowie was aggressive, unfortunately, with this dog and continued to be aggressive. So I had to make a decision. Do I give Bowie up, or does he go to the pound? Or do I find a home for him? But given into the fact that he was aggressive and he was potentially going to be a liability on somebody, I decided to put him down. And it was a traumatic experience, March 12th, 2020. I was very distraught for a bit, and it was hard. I felt like it was a failure. I still took care of Buddy, who's actually around here in the backyard. Um, my dogs will run up here eventually. But he was going to hurt that dog, so I decided to make the decision to put him down. But this was after 4 years of being in a close relationship with a dog that I really loved. With this, I learned a valuable lesson in dog ownership, and not only if you are going to have a dog, what are the good reasons about having them, but also what you need to do in order to help the dog and make sure that you are being successful. So that will be also a part of this speech. But I just wanted to open up with that story in a sense that you become really attached to animals. And that's one thing that I see as a great benefit in having a dog, is because they will provide that joy that will also help your health. So it is actually good for your health in order to have a dog. Or in this particular case, I make the argument for a dog is because you can also exercise a little bit more with dogs. Petting them lowers your heart rate. Not only that, but they are great interchangeable. They're also great for social opportunities as well, and that's also important for your health, especially in this day and age with the pandemic and everything that's happening. So I always enjoy going to the dog park with my dogs in general. For gentlemen, they are great actually for talking to other young ladies that you might be interested in, or other young men, if that's, your preference, to talk with as well in general, because dogs are just great wingmen in general, or wing women. They are very flirtatious. That's one thing I enjoy about having a dog is they are very fun for just meeting people in general. So I make that argument, and that's one reason. Is also the sense of companionship that you will get in going through hard times when your animal is there and you have something to take care of. I believe that benefits you, and that companionship is just very unparalleled. Some people don't necessarily strive for that, and that's understandable. But if you have not experienced I strongly recommend that you seek it because it is very rewarding in that aspect with having an animal, I believe. Another great reason why I believe dogs are great and a reason why you should get them is they're also provide protection in general. I live in not necessarily the worst, but right off of the 82nd Avenue, not necessarily the worst neighborhood in Portland, or not like I'm necessarily afraid, but I do feel better in generally just walking around when I have my dogs. Not only that, but I feel better about just where my neighborhood is in general. Sometimes there is incidences of theft. So I appreciate the fact that I do have two well-sized animals that are just watching the premise in general. My dogs are not aggressive, though. I think they would lick somebody to death, honestly. But it is really important in that aspect, I believe, in having a dog. And I do believe most dogs in general are very loyal to their owners, with their owner spends enough time with them in general. And that is something not that needs to be appreciated when having an animal. Another big aspect, though, is if you are going to get a dog, you also need to take into account the time you need to spend with them. This was an issue for me with my dog before these dogs that I have. Now, Zelda, come here. Moving along. Bowie, I had to leave at work in an apartment. This was a wolf hybrid. He was too large for this enclosure around him, and he suffered because of this. It showed in his aspect, and I had failed in that aspect of an owner. So if you are going to be a dog owner, it is important that you have the time that you can spend with them. I strongly recommend that you at least spend an hour with them of physical activity, such as walking or taking them to the park or running. That makes a huge difference and goes a long way. As you can see, by the way, behind me is Zelda right there, just moving on. Our cute, pretty furry critter that is having fun right there. So, that is something to take really into account, though, is spending at least 1 hour, I believe, with your animal. Also, it is important that you kennel train them. Kennel training is really good for teaching them how to also house train, because when a dog is enclosed in its own space, doesn't want to defecate or urinate in its own area. So that's a great way to set up for that, instill that sort of aspect for it. And also, it teaches them to give them their own space. You want their kennel to be a place they want to go to. Do not use it as punishment. I'm fortunate enough to have a backyard. If my dogs do need to be let known that I'm frustrated, and I don't necessarily do this all the time, I will tell them to go outside, which there's the space. Their kennels, however, are not places of punishment, and I cannot stress that enough, basically. If you do get a dog in general, you need to keep in mind that kennels need to be their safe space, but they are important. And they are good to use, essentially, to instill that. It's a little bit more difficult, I believe, to house training animals without kennels, because it gives them that distinction more so. Otherwise, they kind of believe anything that's not right where they're laying down is a potential area for going to the bathroom. Another aspect, too, is when disciplining your dog, do not physically hit your dog. It is important not to do that because this will trigger their aggression in large. So if you have a large breed dog, and that can create your dog to be a liability, a legal liability. In fact, if your animal bites somebody, the legal implications of it are pretty grave, potentially. And this is a common occurrence that happens. So you need to keep in mind that you want your dog to understand its aggression. Do not enhance it, other than really how, and dogs for the most part are very docile, in my experience, although some dogs are aggressive by nature. That's something to take into account as well. Again, if you have a large dog and it happens to be aggressive, understand and know your dog is my biggest recommendation in that aspect, because it is important, as for not only the legal liabilities, but just in general what your dog is capable of doing to people, and that's your responsibility as an owner to be aware of that. If the dog has bitten people, it is worth considering putting the dog down, in my opinion. A lot of people feel differently about that, but just going through it, experiencing it, it's worth looking at. And it depends on the size, in my opinion, of the animal and its capability. Chihuahuas are normally aggressive, and I don't necessarily think they should be put down for nipping somebody's ankle. That's my opinion. But these are really important questions you need to ask yourself, though, and consider, essentially, though, if you get a large breed dog. But going over my speech, though, I cannot stress enough the good importance of having a dog, such as it improves your health. I went over that. You pet a dog, when you exercise with a dog. It is also great for companionship, in how they spend time with you, the emotional relationship that you develop alongside with your animal, and also just the social aspect of what they provide in meeting other dog owners. But just in general, people are drawn to dogs, and it is great to see. I enjoy seeing my dogs loved by people. I enjoy loving my dogs in general. Also, it is important to understand that they are protective, but be understanding, though, and know the capabilities of your animal if they are protective and also going to be aggressive or potentially aggressive. And treat your dog well. That's the best advice also, and spend as much time as you can if you are going to get a dog with them. But in this speech, we've gone over all of that. I hope I have convinced you and persuaded you to get a dog. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.